microphones have been switched to silent and that background noise is minimised. I wish to also acknowledge the traditional owners of the land and I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I wish to welcome any members of the public that are watching via our live broadcast. I'd like to also introduce my fellow committee members that are present with us here today. I'll start on the left end, Mr. Lee Lamas, Mr. David Davis, Ms. Wendy Lovell, Ms. Bev McArthur, Ms. Sheena Watt, and via Zoom we have Mr. Tim Quilty. To all witnesses, all evidence taken at this hearing is protected by parliamentary privilege as provided by the Constitution Act 1975 and further subject to provisions of the Legislative Council standing orders. Therefore, the information you provide during this hearing is protected by law. However, any comment repeated outside the hearing may not be protected. Any deliberately false evidence or misleading of the committee may be considered a contempt of Parliament. All evidence is being recorded. You'll be provided with a proof version of the transcript following the hearing. Transcripts will ultimately be made public and published on our committee's website. We welcome your opening comments, but ask that they be kept to a maximum of 5 to 10 minutes to ensure we have plenty of time for discussion and questions. Could you please give your names for the benefit of our Hansard team and then begin your presentations? Over to you, Joe and Simone.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Committee, for hosting us today. My name's Joe Toohey, and joining me today is Simone Schinkel, and we're the conveners of the Arts Industry Council of Victoria. We also acknowledge we're speaking to you today on Kulin Country. We extend our respect to elders past and present, including any who might be here today or listening on the live stream. In our brief opening comments, I'm going to start by outlining some of the current challenges that we've experienced in the arts and culture sector before Simone presents some of our recommendations, all of which focus on where we're sitting currently. In our submission, we noted challenges around economic and financial impacts around mental health, social and cultural equity, digital delivery, staffing and risk mitigation, and the priority of arts and culture, as well as balancing capacity restraints and density limits. The three themes of uncertainty, inequity, and what we summarise as a transition to normal challenge really underpin all of these challenges. Uncertainty results from the loss of casual staff from arts organisations, the risk of further breakouts and subsequent lockdowns, and the inability to secure underwriting from insurance brokers, in combination creating a huge challenge for event providers in 2021. By inequity, we mean that the reopening phase that we are slowly going through now will present different challenges to different communities. As an example, the move to online events during the pandemic has actually greatly benefited a lot of deaf and disabled audiences. As we begin to open up again, however, the requirement to make decisions or choices and the discontinuation of some digital offerings and the increasing capacity of live performances might actually present a risk of excluding these audiences once again. And finally, on the transition phase, both in terms of easing of some restrictions and the winding down of a number of government support programs. Many government support programs to date have been designed as emergency measures or after-the-fact supports, and what we need now are transition measures through 2021. For example, many music venues simply won't be able to profitably deliver events until density restrictions are completely, not partially lifted, and they must try and navigate this next phase with most government support now winding down. Because our sector is predominantly comprised of small players either working as sole traders or casual and contract staff, working gig to gig and job to job, many are also navigating a rather complex environment alone or with limited support. I'll now hand to Simone to address how we might tackle some of these challenges.
Thanks so much, Joe. Now, committee members, I'd like to preface our recommendations by acknowledging that our submission is quite broad in its scope, which is in part due to the remit of the Arts Industry Council of Victoria members. Our recommendations are offered in the spirit of continually evolving and changing context in which we find ourselves and the need to continue addressing the gaps as they emerge. We welcome a role in working with the committee and with government to make sure that targeted support is delivered to the right areas through the right channels and at the right time. So with all that in mind, the Arts Industry Council of Victoria believe that it will take a multi-pronged approach and quite a significant period of time to effectively tackle the challenges and impact of the pandemic on the events and tourism sector. And just in way of events, the Arts Industry Council members deliver a wide variety of size and scale and type of event in which we try and capture in our submission. So the reason it's going to take a multi-pronged approach in such a significant period of time is because we are actually still a very, very long way off from operating in what is anywhere near a COVID normal way. The 8 key opportunities that AICV members have collectively identified that we believe will assist, whether that's in 2021 or beyond, include, firstly, as you've already heard today, clear and consistent health guidelines across sectors, across settings, and that align nationally would provide a much more predictable operating environment and one that is actually conducive to recovery. And then, if operating is still severely impacted by the health directives or is to become impacted by snap lockdowns, then the government has a role to play in offsetting this impact. Ideally, this might come in the form of a wage subsidy or, to take me to point number 2, a business interruption fund that underwrites the pandemic insurance risk. Another point you've already heard here today. Number 3, expanding Support Act and the Arts Wellbeing Collective initiatives to cover the entire arts and event sectors and to include tailored streams that are culturally safe. Number 4, the state government's creative strategy renewal is due in mid-2021, and this is actually a well-timed avenue through which support can be strategically channelled across the next few years. Number 5, targeted initiatives that ring-fence support for groups that do not typically receive support in open funding programs. Number 6, the inclusion of events and the creative industries in the pilot secure working scheme that's about to be rolled out, and the continuation and expansion of Working for Victoria and the Jobs Victoria Fund. Number 7 is the adaptation and or expansion of Business Victoria's Technology Adaptation and Innovation Program, as that can provide avenues for sector-wide learning in this new digital space. Finally, number 8, recovery programs need to allow for the longer-term cultural and financial recovery of the sector. And this is beyond any one-year budget commitment. Rather, think in terms of bushfires. This is a generational commitment to rebuilding that will be needed. To end, I simply want to reiterate that we welcome a role in working with the committee and with government to make sure that targeted support is delivered to the right areas, through the right channels and at the right time. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Simone. I might actually start off with the first question, and then I'll go over to Ms MacArthur, Ms Lovell, Mr Talamas, Mr Davis, Sheena, Watt, and Mr Tim Quilty in that order, just giving all the committee members an opportunity. We'll stick to 2 questions each at a maximum because of the time constraints we have today. But I guess you raised a good point about the different jurisdictions and the different, comparisons of what's needed to be done. Could you, or would you be able to provide, a comparison of the support the Victorian governments can provide to the arts sector compared to other jurisdictions? Because I did notice early on in the pandemic in May last year, there was the Victorian government Experience Economy Survival Package, and about over 32 million alone just from that announcement went to, to support creative agencies in our state. How would the support provided by the Victorian government compare to the other states or territories, or you couldn't comment on that?
Well, more recently and in a very specific initiative now in my role at CEO of Music Victoria, we did see 15 million in live music venue support early on. In comparison, New South Wales has just announced theirs, and of course all the venues are comparing themselves, based on caps. Now, the conversation is, did you want the money early, like we got, or do you want it later and for it to be more? So there are differences and challenges about both approaches, to date. In a broader sense, do you want to comment?
Yeah, look, it was. I think we're on the record in providing comments to other inquiries that the overall targeted creative industry and art support in Victoria compared to other jurisdictions was pretty positive. There were a number of programs announced, some of the ones that you mentioned, and at a number of different time phases over the program as well that complemented economy-wide measures that were being introduced as well. So I haven't updated that haven't updated my understanding of what's happening in other states in the last few months since we last spoke to that inquiry. But at the time, that was a pretty favourable comparison, is my recollection from that.
Thank you very much for that, Simone and Joe. You've answered the question I had. I might pass over to my fellow committee member, Ms McArthur. Do you have a question?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Joe and Simone. I'm interested to know these organisations that you represent. Are they funded in any way by government, and are you funded by government?
Our individual organisations are, yes, but the Arts Industry Council, it doesn't receive any separate funding. We see it as part of our remit to work together on these kind of cross-sector challenges like this.
So the overriding organisations that you represent have been, your staff all been kept in a job?
Yes, at our organisations, yes, we've benefited from JobKeeper and a range of other programs, that's right.
Right. And so how much is the total amount of money that you've received from the state government, say, in your industry?
I would have to take that question on notice. Sorry. I'm committee member for all of the members. I could only talk to
We've just heard from the events industry that, of course, they've not got a cent out of government. So you have been supported by the state government. So what do you think is the most important thing in terms of certainty moving forward? Do we need to have a realisation that we have to live in the real world, and that maybe sporadic and short notice lockdowns are not the way to go when industry needs to plan quite a way in advance?
Yeah, having listened to some of your other witnesses this morning, I think it's been a fairly consistent theme, is that the biggest challenge at the moment, I guess, is planning and uncertainty. And I note that whenever those lockdowns have been in place, there has subsequently been announced some kind of business support fund program or something, which is great, but that doesn't help you when you're planning for an event in October. So I think the difference between those, why you're hearing quite frequently the benefits of some kind of business interruption or cancellation insurance program, is the ability to predict and plan that support might be there, given that we're not able to secure that from insurance providers.
So do you think it's been reasonable that rural areas that have had not a case, many places in my electorate, maybe in Wendy's as well, have never had one COVID case throughout this entire period, have not been able to proceed with events, or because of all the rules that have affected metropolitan areas particularly, and so numbers have been limited or ceased altogether? Is that fair, do you think?
Well, the live music industry was getting by because of JobKeeper, but now there's no more JobKeeper, and so there's no COVID in the community, but we're still trading at 30% of licensed capacity because of the 1.2 square metre density quotient.
Okay.
That's not sustainable, and yeah, the risk is not.
Thank you for that, Ms McArthur. I'll just remind committee members 2 questions, and we'll get another opportunity to go around. Mr Lovell and then Mr Talamas.
Thank you. So you just acknowledged that the biggest challenge has been planning and uncertainty, which is what we've heard from everyone this morning. You've also acknowledged that there's no ability to get insurance to cover the cost of a last-minute, cancellation due to a lockdown or something. Do you believe the state government should be underwriting those costs? So with the your industry and the events industry, there's a significant amount of money that goes into preparation for an event, bumping in, etc. It's cancelled at the last minute. Do you believe that the state government should be underwriting that if they cancel it at the last minute?
Yeah, absolutely, actually, because I think the balance that needs to be achieved is that we need to plan, we're willing to commit to it, and also we've tried to look at this in a commercially viable way and seek support as a collective of industries going, this is a new challenge that has been presented to us, and we're not getting any support from, insurance companies, basically. So we need that next level.
Yeah, absolutely. And also just, I don't know if it has affected you, but it's certainly affected my electorate. I have an electorate that borders with New South Wales and South Australia. The effects of border closures on the industry. Do you have any comment to make about that?
I might tackle that. So, in my day job is as the Director of Regional Arts Victoria, and yeah, it's been challenging. My parents live, my dad lives in Albury and my mum lives in Indigo Valley, and particularly that initial phase.
My constituent.
There you go. I'm sure she says hello. My dad saw in the business that he was operating in, which was not events, they relied critically on being able to people servicing a cross-border region. I mean, in the reality of the way that people live and including how they attend events is not actually about state borders, really, or local government borders. So, yeah, that was a particularly challenging time. I have to say that it hasn't come up more recently since some of those adjustments were made to the way that people could move within those regions. But absolutely against those hard borders, that was a significant bit of feedback that we were getting in those phases there. So absolutely.
Thank you.
The events and entertainment industry is a national industry. That's how we work. That's how we run. Borders are irrelevant in day-to-day business running. So it's presenting huge unforeseen challenges that hadn't been faced before, trying to navigate these sorts of border closures.
Not for 100 odd years.
Yeah.
I might pass over to my committee member, Mr. Talamas, to ask a question.
I don't have any questions at the moment, but if you want to...
Yep, I'll put it on notice. I might maybe ask an additional question a bit later. Mr. Davis?
So I just want to return to the rules, and I've closely looked at the different restrictions in all of the different states, especially the ones we'd compare ourselves with, New South Wales and Queensland. And it's still the fact, isn't it, that even with the changes made, at the weekend, we're still the most restrictive of any state.
And the process is extra difficult and takes extra time. And the most recent announcement was made at the last minute and came into effect at midnight that night. So in terms of communication of the new guidelines, restrictions, rulings, etc., I can't get that out to my members in time to make any difference immediately.
So, and we've still got these restrictions that mean the density and as you say correctly, the process is very cumbersome in Victoria compared to other states. Is your sector sought to work out the cost of that process and the...
I know one artist manager has reported a 20% increase in cost for COVID compliance, changes of flights, the factoring in quarantine periods on their work.
We've in a number of we also deliver some funding programs on behalf of state and federal government, and in the most recent one, we added people could apply for a 10% extra in their grants just to meet COVID safety costs. So it's a real expense that is being acknowledged and coming back to us, certainly at our organisation.
And just to come back to the point, and I think Beverly made a very good point just about the amounts of state and national support. I mean, the bulk of the industry support has actually come through JobKeeper until now. Is true?
I'd have to take that on notice and do the calculations officially.
But maybe you can take that on notice
Yep.
as she's sort of requested. And then there's been some state support. So some companies and so forth have actually got no state support, as I understand it. And so they're left...
And there's so many different parts of our ecology that work in different ways and function. So most recently, the circuit breaker action business support was ineffective in helping any musicians who are sole traders and don't meet the 75 grand GST threshold. So there's always a group that misses out for whatever reason. So it's just...
So that sole trader money,
Yep.
you would have thought would be ready-made for some artists, as you say, but actually
They missed out.
they just missed out.
Yep.
So, yeah. Is there a single suggested state support for those smaller sole trader or musicians and others who are, perhaps on their own? Is there a single way of that you've recommend that they can get some additional support through this next period?
We've been reflecting on even the gaps that JobKeeper had, because again, lots of individuals weren't eligible for, and I might have to get back to you again, but we were looking at is it the ANZIC codes that are correlated?
Yeah.
That we think is probably the best way forward to really look at what people's jobs are and how they apply to an industry.
It's a great suggestion. One of the others I would add is we're actually delivering a Working for Victoria program for the arts and culture sector at the moment, and the difference with that program is that we have employed an artist rather than contracted them as a sole trader, and I know that that's a temporary measure, the Working for Victoria program. There is something to that model that is exciting and could be further explored, where there is an opportunity not just to offer open application funding programs where you have minimum requirements, but industry bodies or other arts organisations could be encouraged to engage people as employees rather than as sole traders or contractors, which means that we are required to put in the submission and do the work, and we don't have to do the test of whether they're a sole trader or a casual. We engage them because they need the work and then they can do the work for us. So one of our recommendations was that program has actually got great potential for the arts and culture sector going forward, we think.
And finally, the galleries, and there's lots of regional galleries and others that I think have been hit quite hard. Do you want to make some comment about what can be done to help them?
One of the main recommendations that we've made on multiple occasions is that any state or federal government programs that exclude local government and universities will heavily impact on galleries, which are, for a big chunk of them, are owned by local government or universities. So that's been a common refrain that's come from all of those bodies, that a number of the supports that have been offered would have been excellent for those institutions, but they couldn't access them because they were owned by local government. We note in there as well that a lot of them found, as you might expect, happens during a disaster, during a pandemic. A lot of them found their staff redeployed or stood down or put elsewhere, and they're basically in a position now where they're all retraining new teams because they lost all of their casuals.
So state government, to be clear, could have actually supported some of those regional galleries directly.
By including local government as eligible for those programs, correct.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. I might pass over to Ms. Watt if she has a question, and then to Ms. Quilty after.
So, thank you very much for your contribution, and I know really this is a very wide membership of the organisation, and trying to find a question that covers all of that I think is going to be a tough one, but I must confess mine will not do that. I'm keen to further explore this issue of industry support for affected industries, and as you say, universities and local government were also two of the most high-profile industries left out of JobKeeper. So is there any particular response from you on what that has actually meant, the inability for local government-owned and run facilities like theatres, galleries and others, on the impact of that? I'm interested if you've had any reflections on that, and I do have a follow-up question, Chair.
Yeah, so I might go first, if that's okay. So I spoke to a couple of local government-run venues in the last week, and they are in, as I just briefly mentioned, then they're just retraining entirely new teams. I went to one of their first events out of lockdown, and it was it was a bit of a teething exercise for them. There's people who are entirely new to the organisation. There are people who have perhaps are actually lost to the sector because they couldn't get work during the pandemic and went and found employment elsewhere. And there's going to be a challenge there of skills shortages. One of the things that I know it was mentioned in one of the earlier presentations was the impact of that is a lag in if people are spending their time upskilling and training new people, we've got to now expect that their ability to deliver on events is not a light switch. It doesn't tick over. So I think this is an outcome, I guess, of their inability to access support last year that I don't have any really concrete recommendations about what to do about it now, except to know that it's happening. Yeah, it's a consequence of those decisions.
Yeah. And just quickly to follow up, the Working for Victoria program, you've talked a little bit about that. I do know that there has been then considerable take-up with local government around Working for Victoria. So is that particularly impacted, positively, I would hope, some of your member organisations in local government around the state?
A number. So the Australian Museums and Galleries Association was able to get some support for employing people in regional galleries and museums. That some of them were local government owned, I understand. So yes, they were able to find some employment through that program. And as I mentioned before, Regional Arts Victoria, in my day job, is delivering a schools, an artist in schools program. It's not. It's noting that schools too were pretty heavily impacted by the pandemic. Has been a bit of has been an exciting one to be part of. So, in speaking to that local council venue last week, they did also mention that council. I'm trying to think of a diplomatic way to say it. Maybe I'll just say it. Her view was that a lot of local governments had been a bit slow to realise the potential of that program to deliver arts and culture outcomes, and maybe it came on board after they'd already made decisions about what to do with their arts and culture staff.
Thank you.
I might just add to that I think one of the challenges is, again, the artificial sense of boundaries and having one council supported through Working for Victoria and the neighbouring one not, and yet artists and our sector crosses those boundaries all the time. So just knowing where to position yourself and how to build support those jobs and those skill sets beyond one boundary is the challenge.
Thank you, Simone. I might go over to Mr. Quilty. He's online, so you can watch him from the big screen. Mr. Quilty.
Yep. So this has already been partly answered, but I wonder if you have any specific suggestions or measures that will be targeted to regional players and small players in the industry that the government should do.
Do you want to talk about the small venues?
Well, yeah, I can talk to small venues. So at the moment, we are allowed 100 people or more in our house with no QR coding, check-in, no social distancing, and yet a whole lot of love in Brunswick, my local bar, can have 30 people. And yet they are heavily regulated. They've got their liquor licensing, they've got their check-in, their event managers of, events. This is what they do for their day job. And yeah, we're just cut off at the knees in terms of that sort of consistency for the smaller players. And the best they've got is me actually presenting here and having those conversations, because they are a one-person run job place, and so they just don't have those direct lines to government to make a real change or to have their challenges heard. Do you want to talk regionally, Joe?
Look, the only thing I would add is that a lot of the organisations that we deal with are volunteer-run organisations. They're built off the back of the energy of the local community in those arts and culture festivals. We are seemingly spending a lot of time now talking with them just about how to do a COVID-safe event. It's complex and challenging, and a lot of people will say it's not worth my effort. So programs that help provide that support and that guidance, rather than just a template that you have to kind of navigate your own way through. I think people need to be able to have somebody sit with them really a lot of the time and work through those programs, and so that their valuable volunteer time is going towards what they actually signed up for, which is an arts event.
Mr. Quilter, do you have any more questions? No. I just had one question that actually, from the discussions we've had, I think it's important. So what I'm hearing is that we might need probably a national approach, because a lot of the events and in this space arts sector doesn't just operate on municipal or state borders, especially for the regional towns. Would your sector like to see, I guess, uniformity across, I guess, approval mechanisms or density quotas, that information across across the nation? Is that what you're calling for, not just across the state?
Yes, absolutely. But we also don't want to be caught in the crossfire of people trying to sort that out. I mean, we do need to support the Victorian sector right now, and the time that those things take to negotiate should still be pursued, but we also, it doesn't get you off the hook for right now.
Needs movement now.
Yeah.
We've got, if time permits, I might allow one more question to committee members if they have one. I've
got one.
Yep, Mr. Davis.
So
one last
we
question.
heard earlier about the events sector and how they had not been able to get clear contact with DHHS or DOH as it is now. Is that the experience of your sector as well? Have you been able to meet freely with Department of Health to discuss how to do these things?
No, we've typically gone through Creative Victoria or DJPR.
The DJPR, okay.
That's right, and the liaison has come into government that way. That's been my experience, Simone. I don't know about yours. I mean, some health representatives have occasionally come to those meetings, but it's been made very clear at all the meetings that I've been at that the health priorities and guidelines will win the day. They will trump all of those conversations.
But the issue we had with events is that they couldn't get to health to talk through the specifics and unique aspects.
So Music Victoria has been able to do that, but only in the last month. I've only been in the position for 5 weeks, and we've done it in that time. But it's still not explicitly clear, and especially for the smaller players, it's harder to get that conversation with health going. We can present, but we need the feedback loop to allow us to take on board what they're most nervous
modify and understand and
yeah. So it needs to be a continual process that we're still pursuing. Also, the events partnership framework, that one, that's an avenue that some of the bigger end of town and commercial operators can pursue, and some have from our sector. But I guess, it's not equal for all in terms of real conversations with health.
Simone, any other communities? I got Miss Watt, then Miss MacArthur. Oh, Miss MacArthur first. Sorry.
Surely what we need is Victoria open for business. Surely what we need is an end to this ability of state premiers to decide on a whim that we'll shut a border or we'll not allow an event to go ahead. Surely your industry just needs to get on with doing what they normally do, don't they? We can't continually ask the taxpayer to keep everybody on the drip, can we? You need to just get back into business and on your horse and on with the event, don't we? Isn't that what we really need here?
On the stage.
On the stage, off the horse and onto there might be a horse
Well, for
on the stage
music,
as well.
we're essentially commercially viable in a good time. Like its actual reliance on government support is so minimal usually, but given that we can't trade or we're so limited, it's impossible. So, I mean, just specifically speaking now from Music Victoria's point of view, we want to be at 100% and just operating, but if we need a snap lockdown, let's do it. But we can't live so nervously, I guess, because we've got nothing supporting us while we're taking these hesitant, slow steps forward. So 100% and then some business interruption if we do need to snap lockdown.
Miss Watt, did you have a question?
I did have a question. As Victorians, we're enormously proud of our arts industry, and part of that is that we share it with other parts of Australia and indeed the world. Do you have any reflection on your members, including their practitioners, and to what extent they've been able to perform interstate? I know obviously internationally is very challenging, but where's that one at? Frankly, it brings back money into the Victorian economy. So what's going on with your members and interstate performance, tours, exhibitions, whatever it is? Yeah.
Trepidatious is the way that I would describe the vibe.
That's a big one.
Thank you. I'm glad to get a new one on the recording. The risk, of course, it is possible to do it. The risk, as we've talked about before, is that we might be midway through a tour in Queensland and be locked out of our home state for 14 days. You can't have a 14-day break in the middle of a tour. It just doesn't work. So when I say trepidatious, I would say that people, those experiences and those some of those lockdowns and some of those things that have happened in the last little while, they add up. So the experiences that in our part of the sector in terms of national touring have been pretty limited, and at our organisation, which normally does a couple of national tours a year, we're wholeheartedly and completely within Victoria in our touring program this year, just because it's a bit of a risk mitigation exercise. There are others that are doing it and are willing to take that risk, but for those that aren't, that's a little bit about why that might be the case. Internationally, obviously, is kind of a bit of a moot point at the moment. But, yeah.
Thank you for that. On that note, I just wish to, on behalf of the committee, just thank the Arts Industry Council of Victoria and you, Simone and Joan particularly. You've been very informative and very helpful to our committee's inquiry. If we have further questions, because I know there's a couple of questions I noticed from committee members, would you be happy to respond to those if the Secretariat was to send them through?
Yes, certainly.
Thank you very much.
And Chair, just given that you're a body that's made up of quite a few constituent parts, it may be that some of your other parts want to make highly specific points, and they should feel free to do that.
And also, we've encouraged our individual members to make submissions as well.
Thank you.
And you'll get back to us with those figures.
Yes.
Thank you.
The committee will now take a short break before the next witness. Thank you.
Thank you very much.